started. You will get a copy of it later, and also if you ever can't attend one of these sessions, just let me know and I'll make sure that you get the recording sent to you so that you don't miss it. Fliss, can you see the screen? See the slide?
Yeah.
Thank you. Fab. Plan today. The focus is on leadership, working with leadership teams. And what I've got planned for us is opportunity just to, I'm going to give you my 2 pennyworth to kind of get us starting. Of course, on the understanding that there is no right and wrong with this. I will have experienced, you know, certain teams, I work with a certain approach, I'm very strong green, so inevitably, if I'm not careful, that can over influence me. So bear that in mind. So I'm going to give you a perspective, give you a chance as well to share your experience. I'm going to signpost some resources for you as well. As always, there's a lot on Insights Connections, but it's just finding it, and take you through their approach, and then also, you know, get your hints and tips as to how you have done this in the past and what works for you. I'm going to pause just for a moment. Any questions, any requests before we get going? Awesome. Please interrupt me at any point whatsoever. If I'm advocating something that you're thinking, oh my God, I've done that, or that's not going to work for me, please just interrupt me as we go through. My perspective on this, as I was putting this together, I found this really interesting because when I started off working with senior leadership teams, I went thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to be really good today because of the level at which individuals were working. And I thought, God, I'm going to have to really pull out of the stops, and it really needs to be something special. And then quite quickly, I got to the point of just thinking, oh my God, these are just people. And the same kind of issues arise as if I was working with frontline, you know, staff, or if I was working with, you know, managers in roles for the first time. And are they so special? And that kind of helped my kind of expectations on myself. I mean, we want to be good for anyone that we're working with. And then I've gone a little bit full circle on this, because, and please challenge me on this, from my perspective, I have noticed a bit of a difference when I'm working with leadership teams. Sometimes I will go in with an absolute standard slide deck. I won't do anything different. And I do think there's something in some of the organisations I work with really positive, because I want those guys to know what we're doing with everyone else in the organisation. I don't want it to be any different. I want them to have the same experience and to get what other people are taking away from it and what it's like for them. But there are some tailored decks. There are sometimes some things that I do a little bit different. And I guess it's playing it by ear based on the culture, on the level of leadership that, you know, you're working with, or the brief that either you have or you simply haven't been given as well. What I have noticed, and this might not be the case, it might depend on your culture, but I do see actually a lower degree sometimes of safety at the most senior level, that it's a lot more difficult for people to turn around and say, I don't know, I'm struggling with this, I don't get this. I wonder if that goes with, you know, that lower degree of vulnerability as people climb higher and they get to that point of, I can't admit any failings. So sometimes in the setup of the session for me, and sometimes some of the work we do, we really look at that level of trust. Ooh, but if it's not there, that can be quite difficult. So I think that level of trust can be difficult. And also, anecdotally, what I've noticed is that sometimes when I'm working with a frontline team, they've got a lot more in common. You know, if I'm working in public sector, I might have a team where one of them's leading children's, one of them leading adults, one of them leads environment, and they're very different. Or one of them's leading, you know, private sector's marketing, one of them's in, you know, finance, one of them's HR. And again, the functions are a lot more disparate. And they might not spend a lot of time with each other because they spend time more in their functions. I know this can happen kind of at middle management teams as well, but I do anecdotally notice a lot more silo working at that level. And as a result, I'm not going to go into this in any depth, but what I will do with the slide deck, when if anyone was in the November catch-up, we looked at Lencioni, and that's often a model that I might bring a senior leadership team to, because it looks at trust. It looks at silo working. So if you want to go and have a look at that link from last time, that might be helpful. But I'm focusing today really specifically on insights. What I've also noticed is that I don't always get much of a brief with senior leadership teams. That might be different for you, but I don't always get too much. And it can be more formal. I'll go in with a slide deck, or it can be in the first 5 minutes, we've kind of thrown that out the window because they clearly don't want to play ball for whatever reason. And actually, we're then team coaching. You know, and I've got some materials and I've got some kind of like handouts. I always, you know, if I'm doing face-to-face, I always take a printout of something with the colour behaviours on. So I've at least got that to kind of share with people. But I'm really conscious that sometimes if I've got a senior team and they don't want to stick to the brief that I've prepared, that I've come along to with, then we kind of go where they go. And quite often, I think more so with leadership teams than with frontline teams, my first question might well be, what do you want from this? You know, this is precious time. It's not often that you're together for this time and you're not talking about business activity. So what's good for you? And I might ask them, and, you know, this is such a green question, isn't it? There's probably a much better answer, you know, a red-based question. So that's me. How can I best support you in that? And then I have to trust the team. You know, these are highly capable individuals. And therefore I trust that we're going to go in the right direction with them. And I trust that I'm going to have something up my sleeve and I'm going to be, you know, we've got a framework at least with insights. We've got a model that we're going to discuss. I'm not going in there without anything at all. And we can explore it and you know, have some thoughts around it. So that's my particular experience. I often find I'm asked, can you just do 90 minutes, Julie? Or I know we had 3 hours, but X, Y, and Z's happened this morning. So we're down to 2 or 1, whatever it is. So you might well have a team that really do, you know, we want guys to invest in this. But it's the reality, I often find, that it can be cut short. But I wonder, because of sometimes, this might be indicative of the teams I'm working with, because there's a lower degree of safety sometimes. They do, in my experience, tend to invest a little bit more in the upfront time. So quite often for me, when I'm doing a team, the first intervention might well be the workshop, and then we might do some one-to-one coaching or do some follow-up. But with leadership teams, I'm quite often asked to do one-to-ones first. And I think there is that little bit of a, what's this about? And I don't want to be too vulnerable, so let me see it and I want to digest it. And so it might be there might be a bit more appetite for putting that time up front for you. And I'm really, really conscious. When I was looking through the insights materials, what I've realised is I think the elements that they've designed for leadership is a little bit more appropriate for leadership programs rather than leadership teams. I think it's a little bit different when you're working with an intact team. That's what I'll signpost both today, because you might well be rolling out insights as part of leadership programs. But when you've got a team together, I think that looks different. There might be some overlap on the slides. There might be some, you know, overlap in what you cover. but it's a little bit different. Crikey, I'm going to pause. Can I just check as I come away from that slide, any kind of comments on what I've kind of run through so far? God, does that even tally with what you guys are experiencing?
If I make a contribution here, I've had a light bulb moment recently, because I primarily design and deliver any kind of lead cultural training. So that's what we call it. It's kind of anything that's kind of people and culture based, which includes leadership training. I've always been very proud of the fact that we pilot it to SMT first of all. So that's the exec and the directors.
Wow.
And I'm always very proud that I can say to other members of staff, exactly what you are in receipt of has been endured by our most senior staff. But what I've realized that I've done, and it's almost like I did a thing and I did it to myself, is I badge it as a pilot. And that gives the impression that it is therefore a review and approval, as opposed to being a product for them, if you see what I mean. So what I realize now is there are actually issues at that level that aren't being openly addressed or discussed or worked on. And part of that is because actually it's almost like I'm saying, you don't need this, but can you check it's okay for everyone else for me? And I just had this like, oh wow, okay, I did that to myself. I need to shift that a bit. So I'm hoping that the next round of stuff that we do after some restructures that are coming up will be a little bit more, this isn't going anywhere else just yet. This is for you, because you need this too. And maybe it'll go elsewhere, maybe it won't. We'll see. But yeah, it was just a bit of a like, oh, wow.
Okay, I totally get that. And I also, even sometimes without badging it as a pilot, I do get a sense of, oh, this is for other people, isn't it? Yeah, and so I think our directness in bringing that challenge as well, and that can be quite difficult as an internal facilitator when you are pushing it at that senior level. Go on, Fliss.
It's just following on from Kate, really. And I think it's, sometimes we're in fear of that, especially if you're going a top-down approach. So I'm from Dorset Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service, and this is something that Julie actually went to our SLT first. And it was almost to get that commitment and the buy-in from the leadership teams, and then we rolled it out to everybody else. So I completely see where it could have looked as though, oh, we're just testing it out and see whether they want to go with it or not. But I think a really important selling point for it is to say, look,
yeah,
we've actually done
I think
this.
You're right, Fee. I've seen that too. And I know from an OD perspective, oh, can I check, am I still connected?
Yes, you are now. You disappeared for a second, but you came back.
I am back in the room. Fliss, I'm so sorry. I don't know if I didn't catch the end, but I'm just going to kind of move on from that.
Carry on.
I think the way you guys did it, from an OD perspective, absolutely, you role model it at the top. I've also done it the other way round, where the appetite for it has often come from a HR director, and they get it and they know the value and they do it for their team, and it starts to build. You light a few fires across the organisation, and then the senior team are going, hang on a sec, we want a bit of that. And it's the other way around. But I'm with, whether it's top down or bottom up, we just want to do it, don't we? We just want to get it out there. Go on, Yolanda.
Hi, Julie. Yeah, just actually reflecting on some work that I've done with Julie and senior leadership teams. So definitely appreciating what the other couple of people have just said. But we presented it to the senior team of a directorate with the view to saying this is how it can then cascade to the layers below you, because you will be role modeling it, but we will roll it out with you first, so you might feel special and engaged and actually see the value, and they become our kind of pioneer, champions of this program, because they're talking about the experience they've had. But I think if we set our senior leadership teams up to know the potential of how this will then reach everybody else, but maybe in a slightly different form, maybe diluted in some ways, but actually we just got then a very consistent understanding that starts from the top and will actually absolutely reach the kind of lower levels.
Fliss, did you want to add?
Yeah, sorry. Just I think as well, the other benefit that we've had from starting with SLT first is that we've actually used SLT profiles and their team wheel to roll it out to the rest of the service, so we can get their engagement and look at how different members of staff can dial up and dial down different behaviours when working with SLT. So it's been a really good conversation point for us doing it that way down.
Yeah. Sarah, I'm thinking about when we worked with highways as well, and the senior member of staff came to every session with the profile and shared what they weren't so good at, and that became a little bit of an issue, didn't it, because he a little bit caricatured himself. But the openness and the vulnerability of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was something that became the language of the department and of the service, and the culture. This is the language we use. This is, you know, we're talking about these descriptors because we want to really get under the skin of who we are and how we work effectively together. And it's the lifeblood of that particular service now, to the point where they're asking for more of it now with new cohorts and having brought in a new element to the service, quite a big cohort of people. That's where they're starting that culture piece and bringing people in. So really positive, you know, really well embraced by somebody that really benefited from it as well. As that leader, he really benefited from having that as really leaderful language.
Always goes down better, isn't it? As much as we can advocate for it, if someone like that in that part of the business can do that, it just gives a lot more value, I think, to it. Right, what I'm going to do is let's do some breakout rooms, and I'm just going to ask you to share, to introduce yourselves, and also to share your experience as to, you know, what have you done so far and what's worked. And personally, I always learn from what has horrifically bombed, and I will never be doing it again. There is always that kind of aspect as well. We're going to run for 15 minutes. Let me just do that. Cool. You're going to have about 5 people in a breakout room, 4 or 5. So introduce yourselves and just what experience, if anything, has worked so far, and what's worked well and what hasn't. Any questions before I do that? Right, 2:23. We are back at 2:38. Rooms should be open now. Hey, we're back again. First point, Helen Dillip, I'm so sorry. I set out the breakout rooms and then I pressed the button and I didn't realise you were in the room together and you're from the same organisation. So apologies for not allowing sufficient cross-pollination, but we'll hopefully have another chance. I'm not going to name people, not putting any pressure on people. Is there anything that you want to share from the breakout rooms based on what you've just been discussing?
We talked a little bit about constantly having to reinforce the language.
Yeah, in regard to the labelling.
Yeah, blue people and yellow people. I'm red, I'm green.
And Karen, you're really good at this. And I know that you're really good at this because I've sat in 1 or 2 of your workshops a long time ago.
Indeed. Yeah, my constant mantra.
Well, you know, I'm with you. I remember going in recently and delivering across an organisation. There was no other facilitator. I know exactly what I said in every one of those workshops. And then I went back in and I still heard, you're a red. You would say that, wouldn't you? You're a blue. No, yeah. It is the shortcut, isn't it? Yolanda, Sarah, Dilla, Helen, I'm conscious of working with your guys at the moment around trying to get away from some of that labelling. And one of the suggestions is it's very easy on the slide decks to take off the outside circle. So get rid of fiery red, earth. I've always hated earth green. It sounds like I'm a flipping hippie. So take off those labels at least. And I know that you guys are keen, rather than talking about the red, the blue, to talk about the more directive style, to talk about the more nurturing style, rather than, but it's human nature, isn't it? It's the shortcut.
Yeah, I would agree there, Julie. There's something about using the descriptors and explaining what we mean by it, as opposed to necessarily the titles. And I'm vehement about this, almost, you know, to the point of I will call it out if it happens in groups, politely and discreetly. But, you know, for instance, anyone describing anyone as blue, I just say we're not Smurfs. You know, there's something around just kind of making that just not okay, because I think that's where the pigeonholing starts, and being almost quite overt and intentional at the start of the session around saying, you know, this isn't about putting people into pigeonholes and boxes. You know, this is about understanding the order in which we may choose to attempt something or prefer to do something, or if we don't, what that looks like by way of our energy, and really kind of being very intentional about the language.
And I would agree,
think,
because I think otherwise you can fall into that trap of, and I've seen it happen, that people don't want to be read. Oh my God, I don't want loads of red energy, because people think I'm bossy and horrible and you know, and I've seen that happen. My first colour energy preference is red. My second colour energy preference is yellow. But people have a panic on being they start to panic about, well, I don't want to be all that, and I don't want to be all that. You're not all that. You're a mix of all those energies, and you draw on whatever you're drawing on. So like Sarah says, real absolute staunch advocate for not letting that happen, because you can see it happening. Yeah. People then feeling really bad because, oh my God, they're going to think I'm this, they're going to think I'm that.
Joanne, please go.
Yeah, no, I guess I was just going to agree with this issue of the language. I mean, there's a slide which says director, motivator. Now, every time people jump on that title, director, and I always say, this is not about a role, it's not about a job title, but I wish I didn't have to show that, because I have to have that same conversation every time, because what it then leads to is a sense of hierarchy. Every time people think, oh, so reds are at the top, and that came about, I think, possibly because we've got a leadership team that have got very red profiles. But even if other groups didn't know that, there is always that sense of, well, what's best. So I've had the opposite, Kath, that people are quite proud when they have red in their profile. And I've had a director say to me, I'm a bit disappointed because I'm not red. And so we had a very candid then conversation about, what do you think that means?
Yeah.
You know, so interesting. But that, and again, is that human nature to always want to sort stuff into hierarchies, what's best, what's least, what's, you know, and it's getting quite tiresome that I have to do this every time. But what it shows is that that's how human beings process stuff, isn't it? We want to put people into groups. We want to see, what does that mean about you in relation to me? It's such an interesting insight into people, isn't it? And how we think.
Go on, please.
We had a really good conversation in our group around, when people come on these sessions, they're really, really enthusiastic and they want to go away and deliver this to the teams. And this is sometimes where this language gets lost, because a manager will just pick up their sheet and they'll deliver it without any of the background. So that's why it's really important, I suppose, as us as practitioners, as being the point of contact and kind of signposting that it needs to come through us. But it led on to a conversation around where people do go away with it and they really like it, is around, and I know we had this suggestion in our service as to whether we could add it as an email signature, so people could share what their profiles were. And I know different people in the room said they looked at different options when you searched kind of people's name on the intranet, or whether there was another way of doing it. But we ended up having some resistance from that, from people saying, actually, you know, it's similar with the profiles, it's their property, and some people didn't want to share what theirs were. So it was that, whilst it's a really good way of being able to work with people and understand what their preferences were, there's also the caveat that you're having to consider actually the people that aren't wanting to share it, or the people that maybe aren't on board or don't agree with being boxed in and labelled. So that just led to a quite interesting conversation in our group.
Go on, Greg.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in the way I've done it sometimes is to, I like the idea of taking away the fiery and earth. I'm a bit like you, Julia, as also being very earth green. I don't like being referred to as that. So I tend to take that off, and I do take off the reformer and motivator and all that for the same reasons that our other colleagues have said. But the other way I've done it, particularly with a senior group, was to really concentrate on the personal profile first, and almost what the colour order is as a, not quite an aside, but as a much lower thing. I've really pushed the personal profile to get them, because I recognise that in some of the, how can I put this politely, the more sort of normal groups, they would be like our colleague was saying that about, they wouldn't want to be read, wouldn't want to be seen as those traits. But equally, I've seen amongst senior people, it's a badge of honour. And, you know, I can't possibly be a good director if I'm only green. You know, heaven help us all if I'm green, I don't direct, sort of thing. So I found really concentrating on the personal profile and allowing the conversations, perhaps encouraging them, almost because they're a vulnerable group for the reasons you said at the beginning, and also just because they're used to working together, certainly the teams I've been dealing with, encourage them to really think, find 2 or 3 things in the profile that you agree with, perhaps disagree with, or you're not sure about, and check them out with each other. And it doesn't take away, because as everybody said, as soon as people go away, they'll go back to saying, I'm blue, I'm green. But it tends to slightly de-emphasize it, so that their first thought is, where am I in this profile? This profiling is much more important than the actual colour ordering themselves. So it's just a strange way of perhaps looking at it, but it's worked for me, so I just thought I'd share that.
Greg, I really like that, and I've not done that enough, because I do tend to go to the colours. I'm trying to push with the team. This isn't about where you come on these colours. This is about, from a team, trust and understanding. And that's where sharing the profile information feeds in. They don't need to know what the colours are. I really like that. Go on, Helen.
Yeah, I was just sharing with our group. I had a similar situation where I'd rolled out to the leadership team, and I'd then done the session a little bit later on down the line with our management team, and one of the girls came out of there, who's our credit control manager, as leading with high yellow, and she came out and she was sharing her report with everyone, and the COO came over and said, "Oh, you're yellow, therefore you're in the wrong job," and was incredibly disruptive, as you can quite imagine. But that just demonstrates a lack of understanding around the theory. And so what I did as a response to that, as well as having some tricky conversations with both of those people, the next intervention I did with the leadership team, I did the colourful cues, and so just to show that there is different intensities of colour, and that we are all made up of different colours. And then I got them to talk about times where they'd maybe led with something that wasn't their highest colour, just to, again, so to give you an example of where you've used your cool blue, if their preference was high yellow. So really got them to reflect back again and to think we are all colours, and how unhelpful it can be then to pigeonhole, which I thought was quite helpful.
Really like it, Helen. And that little bit of pushback and challenge is what we need. It's how we add value, isn't it? Kathy, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I've also experienced an environment where, because I come from a school environment, but where a number of the head teachers in our trust led with high red, it again was seen as a bit of a badge of honour if people got red, and but people were not happy if they didn't, and we had to do quite a lot of work around, you know, different leadership styles and the values of different leadership styles, and too much red isn't necessarily a great thing. But so I've had that. I was thinking about the idea of putting it on people's emails, and one of the things that would concern me around that is it's not just a labeling, but also isn't part of the whole process, encouraging people to be able to flex more and adapt, and not just, you've always got to come at me from this and I'm always going to present in this way, but that, you know, we're using this as a tool to be more emotionally intelligent and therefore more able to dial up, dial down according to the audience that we're with. And so it's, the colours are a starting point, but they shouldn't be finite. And as we know, people change. The colour order changes. My colour order's changed as I've done it. So that would slightly worry me too. And is another argument for, you know, slightly playing down, oh, you've come out as yellow, or you've come out as, I mean, we'll see those behaviours, of course we will, but yeah, that was my point really.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's all about the conversation, isn't it? I often start with any workshop with a model of emotional intelligence and make the point, there is no perfect profile. What we know, what sets you apart is your level of emotional intelligence. Yeah, still doesn't still doesn't sink in. Kate, go for it.
Sorry, I was on mute. So yeah, just kind of changing tact a little bit. You mentioned around sort of you know, the trust element, and whether people in the sessions, especially leaders, when they're in the sessions, they fully trust kind of each other in terms of being vulnerable and kind of showing that they feel like they have to show up in a certain way. So kind of in our group, I was kind of sort of asking for any sort of information or things that people have done where they've linked Lencioni to the kind of insight sessions, especially when working with leaders, to be able to for it to be a more impactful kind of session, so actually they get the most out of it, because yeah, what I've found, I mean, I've only run it with a few senior leaders and being part of those sessions, but I have found sometimes that there seems to be a lack of trust, so people don't seem to get the most out of those sessions, and actually you know, if they listen to the session, you deliver the session, but is anything going to change as a result of the session, because there isn't that trust there to begin with? So how we can link that into those insight sessions, I suppose.
I'm going to, you'll have from the slide deck, you'll have the link to the session that we did in November where we made that connection, because I think it's really key. I think it takes people beyond a discussion of the profile and links it into why are we doing this? Because you need trust, you need really good challenge, you need to hold each other to account. I'll send you the handouts and you'll have the link to that. Definitely. I like the combination of the two, particularly for leadership teams. Go on, Joanne.
Yeah, I was following on from what Catherine was talking about, that trying to move that focus from this is what you are to more this is what you can be.
Yeah.
And you know, I know we can buy the color blocks from Insight, and but one, to save money, and two, because I think this is a nice little tool to focus people on their development areas when they leave, is that I have a box of Duplo, which is and I get everyone to take the color that they most need to develop, not the color they are, the color that they need to develop. So, you know, if you lead with red, and the color you need to develop more is green energy, they've got to take a green block. And I say, so when I'm walking around the business, what I want to see is your little Duplo blocks on your desk, because that's the color that you've got to work on, not the color that you are. Because that's how I've tried to move away from people focusing on I'm a red. I don't know if I'm supposed to say, I'm not supposed to say that I'm not using the Insights Lego pieces, but, you know, it's just a little reminder, isn't it? And it's great. And I have conversations, you know, I'll be on a Teams call with someone and they pick up their little and they go, oh, I've been using my blue energy this week. And I love that, because they're focusing on what their challenge is, not on what box they're in.
I really like that, Joanne. And I'm also thinking that's an interesting use of the cards as well, isn't it? Rather than focusing on what you see, what would you value more of in that? It's just a little bit different.
Yeah.
Melanie, go on, give us your perspective, and then I'm going to share a final few slides.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to jump in because I'm listening to everything and I fully agree with everything. But equally, part of insights for us is making that awareness of who your colleagues are and how to communicate and connect with them better. So we do use our blocks and we do share them and let people, not because we're only yellow and we can only do things in yellow ways, but just so if I know I'm working closely with Joe Bloggs, if I know he's very cool blue, I have to think, how am I going to adapt how I would normally interact with that person to make sure they're getting from me what they need from me, and we use it that way. So as much as I agree, I also think it's got a real good, still an important message is to understand who the people you're working closely with are, so that you can really connect and work well together, and just be a bit understanding sometimes that they don't mean to sound like they're interrogating you. They're just generally needing a little bit more than you would maybe have given them because it's not your way to give 10 ton of detail. And that was all. I just wanted to say that I do agree with everything, but I also think there's still a lot to be said for being aware of that profile and what that means for you.
I really like that, Melanie. And it just, it's whatever we can do to take the conversation out of the training room and into day-to-day conversations as well, isn't it? So that people have that awareness. And it might be, with the blocks, just these are my preferences, but what do you need today? Or just starting that conversation. Really good stuff going into chat as well. I'm going to keep a focus on and share a few more things for you. Again, not with a sense of right and wrong, but just to signpost what is out there for you to use. Can you see the slides? Is that a thumbs up? Yeah, thank you very much. Fab. So, as always, loads of stuff on insights, connections. They've differentiated, I think, a little bit because of what they did during lockdown. So they've got some generic leadership slides, but there's also slides on there on what that looks like in a virtual world. I think the virtual stuff is pretty applicable regardless, and they're a little bit more updated. The generic stuff, I think, is 2009. They've got a couple of short publications. I'm not going to send them simply because they are huge in regard to file size. And they look at, positive qualities of leaders. They're short, they're like 12 or 20 pages long. Might be helpful if you want a few quotes. Or look at a bit of research. They've got the sample of this. If you remember this, I got this in 2010 when I went on my course. They're still putting them in the kit bags, luckily. Don't forget these. These are a little bit of gold dust. So you will have had one on an introductory workshop, one on a team effectiveness, and one on a leadership workshop. And whilst it's for the participant, this will give you your agenda potentially for a day. There's lots of ideas in there. And there's a little PDF. If you can't find your paper copy, I'm going to send you the sample. I've never, we're talking about, keeping down costs. I've never paid the £30 for everyone in the room to have them. That might be an option for you, but just use yours. Don't forget that that's there. And then they do have a very comprehensive set of facilitator notes that goes to the slide deck. So there's lots of stuff there. In very rough outline, what they are advocating, their kind of potential approach to a leadership day, they invite people to think about what they bring. What do you stand for as a leader? Who do you want to be? There's the focus on strengths and some form of self-assessment, even if it's pretty simplistic. They talk about the value of working in all four of them and what you might miss if you're not standing in each and every one of them. So this is all in the slides, it's all in the decks. An interesting one around pressure and leadership, which I think is quite insightful, around the shadow that you cast as a senior leader. So it's basically bad day stuff, but slightly rewritten from a leadership perspective. so the impact we might unintentionally have. And then, oh, am I going to say a little bit transactional, a little bit about how you motivate, a little bit around decision making, but not a huge amount, and then some general comm stuff. So the language is revised from the normal slide deck to kind of apply it. I will send you those, as I say, so that you've got them to hand. And then for some final action planning. My approach, a little bit different. I have to admit, I've not stuck to that kind of approach. Mine has looked a little bit different. I will often start off by asking the team, what do you want? You know, what's good for you? This is precious time. What do you need? Just to get their buy-in. I will often ask them, give me a few words to describe how your last meeting was, just because it makes it very concrete and starts to bring out some of the how are you working and how honest are we going to be about this as well. I'll ask them, how is the team perceived by others, and how do they know? So, you know, what shadow is that team casting? How do they think they're coming across to the next tier down, to the wider organisation? And, you know, do they get feedback? How do they want to be perceived as well? And then I sometimes go to the Jungian preferences to get us away a little bit from the colours and to dig a little deeper. The introversion and extroversion, I'll specifically get them to focus on the difference in the team and how that shows up for them in regard to meetings. The thinking, feeling, I'll specifically ask around how their decision making is perceived more widely. And I'm going to admit, I don't often, with other teams, really go into any depth with sensing intuition, but I find it quite useful with leadership teams, especially if you've got a team where they are struggling to stay strategic and they're constantly getting bogged down into the operational, because sometimes that's where their point of confidence is, where their comfort is. They like the tangible, they like the immediate, they've just been promoted from doing all of that stuff, and they're struggling to get into that slightly larger picture, helicopter view, more abstract, visionary space. So sensing intuition can be a good one to do at that level. I'll bring them to the team wheel. We'll look at the difference and similarity, the strengths, but also the risks. And that's often a really good point to then come back to how they're being perceived. You know, have we got really high red, blue? Are they being perceived as a little bit remote, a little bit brutal in some of the decision makings potentially? So how does that link back? And I do get them to focus on their meetings. You know, is that working for them? Are they getting what they need from that? I've got a little audit, I've shared these before, I can share it again, that looks at, you know, for any team, if you're working well around all four colours, what does that look like? And then action planning. No right and wrong to it, it's just my kind of starter for 10. I don't know if that kind of rings true for you, but if it helps to kind of talk through that, if you've got a senior team meeting coming up, I'm really happy to do so. Any questions, any comments on what I've just covered before I move on? I'm going to whiz through some of these slides because you're going to get them sent. So I am conscious that Insights have slightly updated the language when they've done these slides for leaders. I've added sets an ambitious vision, because I think vision setting from these different perspectives can look a little bit different, and it puts it in the words of leadership. I think they've missed a trick a little bit as well. There's nothing on that square around the impact of high red on decision making. So I would be tempted as well to add that as well. So they have these for the different yellow. I know you're not gonna have a chance to read those, but that's there if you want them. They then, for me, these are slightly different words as well compared to the usual slides I would use. I guess, you know, they thought about context a little bit more, and slightly different as well in regard to the leadership on a bad day, which I think is helpful. So you might use a standard slide deck, but just add these in, you know, to make it relevant to the team. And then what you will also see in the insight slide is that they've added this additional, slightly different model. So they move away from the 4 colours. I struggle a little bit because we've been talking about the 4, and now we move to this slight hybrid between, it's not quite 8 types, but it's not really the 4, that look across the wheel. And they talk about leadership, results-based, relationship-based, visionary leadership with the red, yellow, and then blue, green, green, blue, centered leadership. Okay, so positive because we're away from the standard red, yellow, blue. So it breaks up the language and the labeling, doesn't it? They very simplistically ask people that to self-score, again, each of these. There's no, I can't find a question set that specifically aligns with this. So they ask, you'll find this in the little A5 book, it's all in here, as well as being in the slide decks. They just ask people, how relevant is this type of leadership to your role? High, middle, low, and 0 to 6, how comfortable are you, or how capable are you of standing in this type of leadership? So really quick self-assessment. And then they encourage a conversation around what do you want to bring to the fore. Okay. Might be really helpful with an intact leadership team. Might be really helpful on a leadership development program where you've got a mix of leaders and you want to get away from the top 4 colours. Okay. So there's more of that in the decks, in the facilitation notes. They don't do a lot more detail around it though. I've simplified it, but there's not a huge amount more, but it's a start of 10 for a conversation. If you do want to go in a little bit more depth, they do have a separate profile. Personally, I think you've got loads of information in the original emails, in the original profiles to release. But I just want to quickly signpost it. So it's called the Transformational Leadership Profile, and it looks a little bit like this. It takes the 8 types. So again, a positive if you want to move away from the 4. If someone's already done a profile, they don't have to do any other online questionnaires. They use all of the data from the profile, and you're going to end up paying £79 plus VAT. I will send you a sample in case you're at all interested. And what you'll find in the report is that it takes each of these different areas and it breaks it down. Joanne, go on, go for it. What's the question?
How does it differ from the management chapter that you can just get in the standard profile? I mean, I obviously I haven't seen that, but we pay for the extra. So you got the foundation chapter, and then you can have the management chapter. I wonder
the
what
management
you're getting.
Chapter gives you. It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's actually phrased managing me and motivating me, and my ideal environment. Mm-hmm. So it's not how do I manage. It's how do I like to be managed?
Yes, true.
I still think there's shed loads in that original profile that can apply. Mm. This is more specifically, oh, hang on a sec.
So it deals with those segments in more precisely.
It's going to look at each and every one. And it will ask you to consider, or it will give you a printed report around these are your strengths, these are going to be some of your challenges, these are some of the hints and tips that you might want to do more of in order to develop this skill.
I see, yeah.
Okay, but it will do it for all 8. It will take each one in turn And the report will look at it in detail, strengths, weaknesses, and areas to develop. Okay. I'm a little bit ambivalent to this. If you've got a team and you feel that, you know, they're prepared to give it the depth and really realise the investment from it, it could be a really good one to do. If you want to pilot it with 1 or 2 people, let me know, because, you know, we might well be able to get you a bit of a freebie and just give it a test and try it out. I'm really reluctant to give people more detail if they're not using what they've already got.
It feels like something you could use if you were doing one-to-one coaching with somebody.
Yeah.
This would be great as a part of their development. You know, if you're doing I don't know, talent management and high performers and stuff like that, this would be really good for your one-to-one coaching. But I was just looking at that then. I mean, there's great content there, but it's a lot of stuff to cover in a session. And
isn't there?
Yeah.
But I am really conscious that my personal preference is that I struggle to hold 8 different aspects in my head. I've always struggled with the 8 types. I know other facilitators, and you might well be in this meeting now, who very adeptly, you know, facilitate across the 8 types. And I get the benefit of it, of taking it away from the oversimplified version of it. I love that idea for one-to-one. I can imagine that's going to be far more effective. I will send you a sample so you can get the gist of what's in there. But the key is realising the investment from it, isn't it? The other slight concern I have sometimes in organisations is that you've got your own set of leadership competencies, standards that might not fit with that. It might be your preferred tool is some form of leadership 360, which is different again, but that will be directly against the behaviours. And you can bring the profiles and the colour balances into that. It's an option, it's there for you. Other kind of questions and comments on what I've just shared? Go for it, Fliss.
I don't know if I'm saying the right thing here, but I lead with yellow and then I follow with called blues. I like to just keep things simple. We don't even go into the 8 types. We just keep it simple in terms of if what we want to do is provide that awareness and education around the colours, and so that people have that really in-depth understanding, and then we utilise that for how, you know, if they need more support with communication, or if they need more support with leadership, if they need one-to-ones, we'll use the profiles for it. So I don't know if we should be going into more, but it's more around not overloading and confusing people. I think it's just in my very simplistic way of doing it, but see that it does have the benefit. But even just looking at that myself, I was a bit like, oh, how would I even frame? Yeah, absolutely.
I've not done it justice, Fliss, but I just want to signpost it, because some of you are going to instantly see that and think, oh, it's so not going to fit with our organisation, or we haven't got additional money to invest, you know, we're doing enough. If you want to dig into it, I'll send you some stuff on, and let's have a conversation separate to this on it. Yeah, but I'm with you. I always think I'm a bear with a little brain, and I can't do 8. Other questions and comments on that at all? Cool. Final point from my perspective, please do not forget that myself and others as your account managers are here to support you on this. So I've had some brilliant conversations in recent months of people preparing themselves in order to go and do that senior team meeting, and just that sanity check of, this is my approach, do you think it's going to be about right? Really happy to have those conversations, but also had some really good conversations of debriefs as well, with people who've come away and are either air punching because it's just gone so well and they've been quite nervous about it, or have come away a little bit bunny in the headlights of what on earth has just happened, because there's not necessarily been the vulnerability, and they're brilliant facilitators, and they've asked all of the questions they've asked but because of the lack of trust, it's not quite, there's not been the openness. So before and after events, in regards to any kind of pre-brief or post-brief, please, users, it's isolating sometimes, particularly working at that level, and just having you know, someone to just stand back and reflect on. We're really, really happy to do that. So any final questions and comments? Because otherwise I'm going to do a final breakout rooms. Any questions or comments before we do that? Fab. So I think, let's have a quick look. Oh, that's not right at all. Slightly different, slightly smaller, I think, breakout rooms, 2s, 3s and 4s. What have you heard? And any kind of final perspectives on it. Go for it, guys. We'll do a final 10 minutes and then I'll do a super quick close.
Oh, I don't think mine's worked.
Oh, what have we done, Helen?
Just stick me in a room. It's because I was late, sorry.
Right. Let's do it. God, how do I do that? Oh, here we go. Right, super simple. You.
Thank you. Sorry to be a pest.
Have you got an invite? Guys, are you all having to disappear off to back-to-back meetings?
Yeah, literally.
Okay.
Keeps us in jobs, doesn't it?
I think our level of resilience, you know, we should pat ourselves on the back sometimes. It's just that, the ability that we have. Keep on and keep on and keep on. So bearing that in mind, oh, that's Greg's photo, isn't it? Was that your baby photo, Greg?
That one, yes.
I love that.
Yeah, we did it as a baby competition and everybody else's was in colour, but I'm so old that it's in black and white. So that was great amusement amongst the team, I can tell you. Yeah.
Absolutely love it. Right, without further ado, I hope today's been helpful. I know that some of you need to scoot to get off to the next meeting. The next webinar is, why on earth did I suggest this? 31st of May, getting technical, a refresh and deeper dive into the graphs and wheels. Oh, why did I look at that? So that will be the plan. Come and challenge me and laugh as I try to work my way through that. As always, if you've got any further requests, either into chat before you disappear off or stay online, really happy to take questions. Drop me or your account manager a request. You're going to get slides, you're going to get some links, some additional documents, and anything else you need to come back to us. If you have a chance, final minute, just a word into chat would be good as to how it was for you guys today. Otherwise, as always, thank you so much. Oh, there's just so much I get from these. So much.
Thank you, Julie. If you've got 2 seconds, I'll stay on. Brilliant.
Yeah, I most definitely have.
Question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Bye.
See you soon, guys. Oh my God, happy Easter. It's around the corner.
Much. Bye. Bye.
Nice to meet everybody. Thanks, Julie. See you next time.
Cheers, Matt.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Seriously, it's just crackers at the moment, isn't it? Right.